Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Part 1, Movie Review. So this is one of my scripted movie review series, in which I take a movie review that I wrote years ago on the weblog and try and make a YouTube video out of it for whatever that may or may not be worth. In this case, this is a movie that I watched back in 2012, so 8 years ago now. 2012 actually is when I watched it, but I was a bit late to the party. The movie itself came out in 2010. It's based, of course, on the book of the same name, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which I did read back in 2007, reviewed it on the weblog and then subsequently on this YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to my review of the book in the link down below. By the time I got around to watching this movie in 2012, some of the details of the book were a little bit faded in my memory, although I still felt like I remembered most of it pretty well. I'll get to that in the review a little bit later. There's some comparisons with the book where I think I'm remembering it right, but I'm not exactly sure. And you can help me out with this in the comments if you've read the book more recently. But anyways, on to the movie. This seems like old news now, but when this movie first came out in 2010, the big controversy was that they were splitting it into two parts. It was something people seemed legitimately upset about. I think nowadays it's been normalized to the point that people wouldn't even notice it so much even anymore. Maybe normalized because of a trend this movie started, but it seems like a lot of movies now get split into two parts or three parts in the case of the Hobbit trilogy. So it seems like that's a lot more common nowadays. Or is it? Maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know. Let me know. What do you think? Has this trend been normalized now? But anyways, at the time, I think there were a lot of people really upset about it. The thing is, from a storytelling perspective, it would have made much more sense to split the fifth or the sixth book into two parts instead of this one. Those stories, the fifth and the sixth book, were the ones that really suffered in their abridgment to the big screen. The seventh book wasn't actually as long as the fifth or the sixth book. And although the beginning of the book started out with a bang, and although it ended with a bang, the middle really lagged. Harry, Ron, and Hermione just go camping and spend several pages arguing with each other. Stephen King wrote of the seventh book that there's an awful lot of wandering around and camping in that tent. It starts to feel like Ms. Rowling running out the clock on the school year to fit the format of the previous 6 books. And I agree, it does start to feel like that. So, ironically, the 7th book is the one that least deserves the double movie treatment. All that being said, I understand from a purely crass marketing perspective that you can't really get away with splitting the 5th book into 2 parts. But you can get away with milking the climax a bit more. But let's change the question. Putting aside the fact that arguably the Order of the Phoenix or the Half-Blood Prince should have been 2-parters instead of this book, and judging this movie solely on its own merits, do I think it benefited from being in 2 parts? Yeah, a bit. All the previous 6 movies have felt so rushed, so it's nice that at least one book in the series gets a more relaxed pace in its transition onto the big screen. I know a lot of people were upset at what they saw as a blatant attempt to keep milking the Harry Potter cash cow, but from the perspective of a viewer, I don't mind. The review. I thought the movie worked all right as an adaptation of the book. The problem with all of these Harry Potter movies is that they never really come into their own as movies in their own right and feel just like abridged versions of the book. And that's true of this one as well. But by this point in the series, I've come to accept that. And so I wasn't surprised when characters were briefly introduced on the screen, had a couple of lines of dialogue, and then promptly disappeared again. We all know who they are from the books, and so it's okay if the movie doesn't have time to develop half of the characters it introduces. I also wasn't surprised when the movie never really reached a satisfying climax before ending. The Harry Potter universe has a lot of colorful supporting characters, but in this book they are unfortunately neglected as the trio of Harry Potter, Ron, and Hermione go off on their own. And that's reflected in the movie version as well. There's one brief scene when all the bad guys board the train heading to Hogwarts and interact with Harry Potter's classmates. But for this movie, that's all we see of Harry Potter's classmates for the rest of the movie. Hopefully, they'll get some more screen time in the next movie. The action scenes in this movie are decent, but nothing special. It's strange. There have been many different directors for the Harry Potter movies, and yet none of them, in my opinion, have been able to do a good action scene. Nobody has yet figured out anything more exciting to do in these scenes than have the characters point wands and yell spells. I'll be interested to see what they do with the big climatic battle at the end of the book, which will no doubt be in the second movie. But my expectations are going to be low going into it. The very beginning action scene in this movie was disappointing. It was set at night, which, at least on my TV, made it dark and confusing to follow. I don't know, maybe this depends on the quality of the DVD or the quality of the TV you're using. Somebody let me know if their experience was different. I had a hard time following it. And, am I remembering this right? I don't think it was set at night in the book. I think that opening action scene in the book was set in the day. Or am I misremembering? Let me know. Plus, most of the action in that opening action scene occurred off-screen, and only later was referenced by other characters. So unless I missed something, Mad-Eye Moody got killed off-screen. Oh, sorry, spoilers. Movie came out in 2010, but spoilers. Mad-Eye Moody got killed off-screen, which was a bit of an ignoble way to send off one of the more colorful characters in the Harry Potter franchise. And George lost his ear off-screen. Would have been interesting to actually show this, would have heightened the drama of the action scene maybe. I don't know. Also, during certain scenes, I wasn't sure why sometimes the characters use their magic powers to teleport themselves, and sometimes they ran. During that chase scene in the woods, I thought it would have made much more sense for the characters to teleport instead, as they had in the previous scenes. Again, with the caveat of, unless I missed something. Was there some sort of reason why they couldn't teleport in that scene that I missed? I don't know. And that's the end of my review. And I end the review by saying, okay, on to the next movie. I'm sure I'll get around to it eventually. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. But as it happened, I never got around to seeing Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I did attempt to get the DVD in Cambodia. I was living in Cambodia at the time. And this is probably most people watching this have not lived in Cambodia. But if you've been to Cambodia, you can get a lot of very cheap DVDs in the city of Phnom Penh, which are usually of decent quality. and it's impossible to get anything legal. You couldn't buy a legal DVD if you wanted to. So I was living in Cambodia. I got a copy of the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows 2. I put it into the DVD machine. I was watching it, and there was this big battle that was at Hogwarts at night, and I started out, I was kind of making out what was going on, but then there were some scenes where I just couldn't make out enough to follow the action. It was just so dark on my screen. And I thought, okay, maybe this DVD is of bad quality. And I thought, I want to enjoy this movie. I don't want to just slog through it for the sake of slogging through it. So I got another DVD, and it was the same thing. And I thought, okay, maybe these cheap DVDs in Cambodia aren't going to do the trick, even though they're usually good quality. So I thought, I'll just wait till I'm living in another country and I have the opportunity to see it in better conditions. Then when I was in Vietnam, it was on cable one night. I had HBO as part of the package of the apartment I lived in. And I settled through to watch it. And that opening scene and that battle at night, and I just couldn't follow it. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's my TV. Because it was a bit of an old TV I was at the place I was living at. And I thought, I don't want to ruin this movie by watching it on a bad TV when I can't tell what was going on. So I just ended up turning that off as well. And I still have not, to this day, watched the movie. I guess if I ever come across it again, in whatever format, be it on TV or be it on DVD or be it on a computer or whatever, I'm not going to give up if I can't see what's happening in the opening scene. I'd be curious about other people's reactions to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Is it just my bad luck? Is it possible to actually follow that opening battle at night at Hogwarts if you have a decent copy and a decent TV? I don't know. I'm actually past the point now where I've stopped caring about it. It used to be a big event when these Harry Potter movies came out, and it was kind of fun to see how the cast was maturing and how that huge cast of characters was interacting with each other. But the last movie is just going to be one climatic blowout battle, I think. I don't really need to see it. Maybe my interest in following these characters has waned at this point. I already read the book, so I know the ending anyways. So, I don't know. I guess if I'm home one night and I see it on TV, maybe I'll watch it. But I at this point, I'm not planning on going out of my way to watch the Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. So don't hold your breath for a review. But I'm not saying never either. Yeah, and that's all the Harry Potter movies I have so far seen. Reviewed on this channel. It strikes me, one last thought. It strikes me that if Hollywood is continuing its current business model, which is to just kind of remake any viable intellectual property, it's only a matter of time before these movies get remade. It may not be in my lifetime. It may be in another 60 years or something like that. But I think it's only a matter of time, right? Unless Hollywood drastically changes the way it does business. So whenever they get remade, whenever that turns out to be, my vote is that they remake it as a TV show. Each book could be one season of the show. And that way I think they would actually have time to do justice to the plot lines and also have time to do justice to the characters. Because by the time we get to this 7th book, even though it is split into 2 movies, and even though I only saw one of the movies, just based on that one movie, there is just no time to spend any decent amount of time with all these characters, even though there are so many wonderful characters that have been developed in the Harry Potter series up to this point. But it's just like brief cameo appearances from half a dozen people and then on to the next scene. So remake it as a TV show, 1 season for each book. I don't know, maybe even 2 seasons for the longer books like Order of the Phoenix. something. But that would be my vote for when they remake it someday at some point in the future.